You know what I also began today, Way? I'm on to my new book.
Ronda Rousey, Our Fight.
Oh, yes.
I feel like I've already read this book. I've seen
I
so
think
many
everyone's
interviews.
getting a sample of this. Let me tell you, like, you can just pretty much pick this up. The wrestling stuff seems like it is pretty did not seem to be a filter in place for her thoughts on the WWE. And she is now doing the media rounds promoting this book. And she did an interview with Cage Side Seats. And a few of the comments that she had was that she says that in regards to Vince McMahon, she kind of doubled down on what she had tweeted out, the fact that Vince McMahon was always there by text message. And when it was spoken about with the main event of WrestleMania back in 2019 with Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch, she said that I felt like WrestleMania 35 didn't live up to my own expectations for it. And I wanted to come back and do a singles match with Becky and really put in the time and development that he needed. And said that WWE just refused to work with me at all. They refused to collaborate. They didn't want to talk to me about it. They kept pushing it off until it finally got on the road to WrestleMania. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to do you and Becky. I'm like, all right, well then I'm fucking leaving unless me and Shayna can tag. If you guys don't want to work with me, you don't want to do something extraordinary, you just want to do good enough every single night. I came here to have fun with my friends. And said that they, in regards to the Charlotte match with Rhea Ripley. I mean, she spoke about that and the line that is going around here about Charlotte pretty much just stating that this is what we're doing and how long that they were going to be going. And at the end, she said that Ronda had a sit down with Triple H and said, I can't be associated with mediocrity. And that's what they seem to be happy with at the time. And I hope that's different now, but I can't say. And she says, I'm so glad that it's getting turned around. Triple H has been great towards the women in the company and really believing in us. He's the whole reason that I was there because he believed in me. I really wish that my last run was under Triple H running things and Vince being gone. So, I mean, the clear people that she had the most angst towards were number one, Vince McMahon, and coming up in second and third, John Laurinaitis and Bruce Pritchard, who seemed to be the focus of what I mean, I will be curious to read the entire book. I'm still on the MMA stuff. And honestly, I think it's the first time she has gone in any depth into the Holly Holm loss. And I find the MMA stuff to be really interesting and just how she dealt with that loss and how this was a woman who seemed to have designed this entire career around herself in MMA of being undefeated. And it was this protection that was made out of glass. And when she lost, it shattered. And she had essentially, like, she basically stated in the aftermath of that fight, she did not have the desire to live beyond having her boyfriend at the time, now husband, Travis Brown. So I think the MMA stuff is really interesting. So I'm not even at the wrestling yet, but you would certainly take these excerpts as someone that I don't think hated her time in WWE, but I think it was greatly underwhelming because of the system that she found herself in. But remains to be seen. I'm sure she had her positives too, but it's certainly going to be a very interesting book. They did plug Becky's book tonight. Didn't happen to mention Ronda's also coming out next week.
No, they did not make a segment for her. I think, wrestlers talking about their careers is always fascinating, but it's, I think this is a special case where somebody is so closely removed from their days in the WWE and is especially at such a top level that this is especially interesting to hear somebody like Ronda be potentially so unfiltered about people that are still currently working in that company right now. Now, I'm also very curious to know how much of this book was already written before Vince McMahon's departure from the company, whether or not...
Which one?
Yeah, great question. Yeah.
Well, I would imagine like all of this was done before this most recent one because that was just January. But I think at the very least was, the Wall Street Journal reporting was out. And while we didn't know the graphic details of the Janelle Grant suit, certainly didn't paint a favorable picture of Vince McMahon. It's just a worse one now.
Sure. But even with Vince McMahon no longer a part of the company, how Ronda has always kind of been known as somebody who didn't have much of a filter attached to her. Now that might be called into question during her time in the company, like we kind of talked about maybe last week. There are maybe some inconsistencies with certain answers that she's provided while working as a member of the company versus her what she's saying right now. And I guess I've yet to see maybe any of the interviews really challenge her on that yet. So I'm curious to see if she's doing a lot of press, whether or not that stuff gets brought up, whether or not the book addresses her thoughts on why she considered performing at Saudi Arabia. But it may be just more of a peek into the behind the curtains of like what it's like being a woman working within that environment. I mean, it's not like we have a lot of texts, giving such recent information from somebody who was there.
Yeah, and it will remain to be seen how Ronda's time in pro wrestling is viewed in hindsight by the audience. Like, here was somebody that I think is now we're at a point where she is maybe not underrated, but I would say underappreciated for her contributions to MMA. That I think she left on such a sour note for so much of the fan base that already in MMA, there is such a turnover when it comes to the big peak stars because it is a smaller time that you have as, at the top of a division. There's such turnover. And with Ronda, we're talking a lifetime ago when her last fight was 2016. And it's almost like Ronda is, I think it just left on such a note as this malcontent to so many people and the way she avoided the media for the fight with Amanda Nunes. I think she had bitter feelings at MMA, and I think MMA fans had bitter feelings at her. And in this instance, I mean, here is somebody that obviously had her issues at WWE, but I think the targets in which she is going after, I think that will resonate with a lot of the fan base. This is not her that is scorching WWE and in fact is going out of her way to praise Triple H. So it's just interesting to see how we will look back at Ronda's two runs. I think the first one in particular was the key one. The second one less so, that she was a difference maker.
I feel like you're talking about MMA.
I'm talking now about like wrestling fans, how they will look at Ronda's contributions going back to 2018. And if they will look at Ronda as somebody that is valued for their time in WWE or someone that was looked at as lesser than that. I mean, she was a massive reason for the fact that the women got to that the WWE got serious about the women. I think you have to look at her as the key contributor.
So I feel like much of that answer to that question will be determined by how the WWE curates that history, how much they want to remind the audience of Ronda Rousey's contributions. They could do a self-destruction of Ronda Rousey if they wanted to, or they could do a glowing praise of like what Ronda Rousey managed to offer the women's evolution. It's kind of up to them. I mean, she's certainly somebody that I could see them offering a Hall of Fame induction to. Now that's provided.
I think that will happen. Like, let's not forget that this is like, she is ingrained with the UFC and with that management. And I feel that they will want as strong of a relationship, but it is, at the moment, yes, you do have Bruce Pritchard that is still in the system. Like, going after Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis, I don't think that's going to upset TKO and WWE.
TKO seems like they at least Ari and Mark Shapiro probably want to say these words themselves at this point. Distancing from those names is exactly what they're looking for. Praising somebody who's currently there in a Paul Levesque, I think, is exactly what they're looking for. So the question of whether or not she's really burning any bridges with the WWE or UFC with statements like this, I don't really think so. Now, what might call that into question is all the stuff that's come out about her discussing her concussion history and having,
which is frightening. Like, that part I am into. And this is, she remembers having her first concussion as a child, like swimming and crashing her head into the wall. And what was alarming was not just the volume. She said her concussions are in the dozens. And what concerned her was how minimal impact would cause them. Like the Sarah McMahon fight, I don't know if you remember, like, this was a pretty quick fight in 2014. And she felt like her bell was rung in that. And she has a pretty vivid description of when she would get these concussions. And again, she said that she counts them in the dozens. And this predated MMA. So think about the sparring that she was doing and save for fights. And then you're going into professional wrestling.
It's wild. Now, for me, the part where like somebody like a UFC or a WWE might be nervous about what she says in the book like this is how that history of concussions managed to escape all their pre-testing protocols. I mean, is it as simple as somebody not mentioning it? And does that call into question how good these testing protocols is? In this interview with Cage Side, Cage Side Seats, yes, she mentions they were scanning my. This is about her jump to the WWE and her being concerned that the WWE would find something. She says, "quote They were scanning my brain, and I was like, please don't find that I'm just falling apart on the inside of my skull. But they said everything looked great. I was cleared to wrestle, but I just wouldn't be able to talk about my concussion history." So
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't doesn't make the testing procedure for, like, if she is being honest about the volume of concussions that she has had and that she was this concerned about going through the screening. Number one, it does give you insight into the performer's mindset that they are not going to disclose. And I mean, we're going back a significant amount of time, but the lesson learned of Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness. One was honest and one was not honest. One got a job and the other got his contract rescinded. And I mean, what kind of a lesson does that tell you in this whole thing? It also makes you certainly wonder that if Ronda ever did have the itch to do another match, I mean, she's almost in a position now where could WWE green light her if she wanted to do Mania next year or in 2 years from now? I mean, we're not talking about a woman who is at an age where doing another wrestling match is out of the question.
But it does feel like she's really shut, like, at least from what I've seen from these interviews, it really sounds like she shut the door on it. But you're right, people obviously in 5 years time could change. Yeah.
It's a great point. And like when she was done with judo, she was done with judo. When she was done with MMA, she was done with MMA. And you would think this book and where the way she comes off, perhaps like that door is now shut on professional wrestling. She certainly doesn't need to do it.
She does, at least I've seen somewhere, maybe suggest the idea of like hypothetically doing an independent wrestling run, just maybe for the fun of it.
Well, I'm sure they will have the most advanced neurosurgeons at their disposal to make sure that there is absolutely no harm that could possibly happen at the independent level. So that's good to know. But yeah, I will finish this book, and I'm sure I will have more thoughts on it to come.